It's time for the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent ETA,
Agent Ether,
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out all of our other wonderful links in the description. Look for the link tree. It's got everything under there. This week's episode, the Allagash Abductions. We don't do too many abductions. I think the only one we've actually done so far is the Betty and Barney Hill. That's the only one I can remember. So
is that the only one?
Yeah.
I feel like we've done one more.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
You might be right about that, actually.
Oh, no. We did Travis Walton as well. So we've done two.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
We need to get on it, man. There's a ton of these things. We've barely touched on them at all. We got to start talking about these.
They're creepy, though.
We got time.
Yes, they are pretty creepy. I mean, if you just picture yourself in that situation, not a fun time, you know? I could see just a plain UFO sighting. Like you're just chilling in your backyard, drinking some beers, flipping some burgers, and you can see, a V-shaped formation fly overhead. That's a good time. You get excited, something to talk about at the water cooler the next day or whatever. But, getting abducted and getting probed, no thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be like George St. Pierre where he's talking about like, oh, I am laying down in my bed and sometimes I have missing time. And like, well, mostly that's my reaction to that is like, did you go to sleep, George?
Yeah, that might be Matt Serra's fault too. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah, that could be possible. Yeah,
but who knows? Maybe. Well, we talked about it before, but he did see a UFO, and we do have corroborating witnesses, which is pretty crazy. Witnesses that might normally not want to corroborate because they're public figures. But all right, let's get to the show. So we're talking about the Allagash Abductions. This one happened way back in August of 1976. 4 friends. Now, I'm gonna have to encourage ETA to comment on these names, but we have some of the best names ever in one of our case files. So first of all, we have Jack Weiner.
First of all, like, what's wrong with his parents?
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard the name pronounced 2 different ways, Weiner and Wiener, but I prefer Wiener, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But not like that, though. Not like that. God damn, that came out wrong. But what's wrong with his damn parents, man? I bet he must have been like messed with in school and shit. Yeah. Hey, Jack, did you mess with your wiener this weekend?
That's worse than a boy named Sue.
I know, right? That's way worse.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna get messed with, like, as a kid for sure, at the very least. And as an adult, probably likely too. Like, when you'd introduce yourself to somebody. Hey, how's it going, sir? What's your name? Jack Weiner. What? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, that must have happened to him at one point or many points in his life. I would have to name, or I have to assume. But then Allagash is kind of a weird a weird name for an area also. Like I remember I knew this girl, when I was a teenager named Alla, and seen her gash, but whatever, I mean, like,
Alrighty then. So anyways, Jack Weiner and his porn star named brother, Jim Weiner. I think those are both good porn names right there. Jack and Jim Weiner.
They're a little straight and to the point, but it'll do.
Yeah. And they're only the third wheel here. The poor dude without a porn star named Charlie Foltz. I guess that actually sounds kind of pornish. Foltz sounds like a dirty sex act, I suppose. And Chuck Rak. Somehow Chuck Rak sounds like a good porn name too. So these guys were in the woods.
Yeah. Hey, Chuck's a boob man,
Yeah.
He can give less of a shit about the ass, but he's a boob man, That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. These guys were in the woods minding their own business when they discovered, a lady with a flat tire I'm just kidding, that they had to help her fix.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, anyways. So in August 1976, 4 friends, Jack and Jim Weiner, who are twins, by the way, Charlie Foltz and Chuck Rak, left Boston, Massachusetts, and headed out to the Allagash River in Maine for a camping trip. Their plan was to canoe, fish, frolic, and camp along the river. So it's a river with a series of lakes on it. I kind of looked up the map because of one of the things in the case I'll talk about later. But the map is sort of like this river with periodic lakes. Some of them look quite large. So their idea was to sort of paddle up and down this river. And there's a town named Allagash. And from what I could tell, back then, you actually had to fly to the area that they went to because it's that remote. So they're in a very, very remote area in the wilderness in Maine. And if you look at a map, you can see there's not a whole lot there. It's kind of the middle of nowhere.
Well, it's just hard to get to, is what I saw, that it's just hard to get to.
I read that back then, the town of Allagash was only populated by 277 people.
Yeah. That's also something, somewhere, very, very few people there.
Yeah.
Very small. Well, I mean, you can't even get there. How are you going to live there, you know? So they started off, they made their way to Telos Lake, I guess is where they began their journey, their fishing and their frolicking. And they started off whoa, my notes suddenly skipped to page 7. That's weird. Hold on. Sorry, I got to scroll back up here.
You have notes?
Yes, I do.
I'm joking.
I have 11 pages of condensed notes here. See if we get through all this stuff.
Nice.
Let's see. So, okay, sorry. Now we're back on page 1. Here we go. Okay. So they were doing their thing, canoeing and canoodling or whatever they're doing out there in the woods. And on the second night of their trip, Jim noticed a strange light in the sky, a strange bright object. This time they were actually at a sort of a busier campground. There was other people around and they saw it too. So everybody saw it, I guess. I don't know. Jim was actually able to see it through binoculars, and he saw the object, which was floating above the treetops. It was there for about 15 to 30 seconds. And he said it looked like some sort of structured craft with like a bright, like a fire or something. Did you hear this one, Ether?
I heard they saw a light, but in the interview, they just said it was brief and then it disappeared.
Yeah, it was 15, 30 seconds. Then it suddenly winked out from the outside edges inward, is what the description is like. Okay. I mean, I've seen other UFO sightings like that before, but it's still sort of an interesting description. That's not a super common description. Pretty unusual. So and I saw a quote, he had an odd feeling that the object wasn't quite right. Yeah, I bet. I'd probably feel that way myself. So they're going about their business, and on the 4th day, they set up camp at Eagle Lake, and they're going fishing for, I guess they're getting low on provisions, or maybe they just want to catch some fish or whatever. So they're fishing on the lake, and they decide to do some nighttime or evening fishing after dark. And as they're doing this, they're getting ready. It's pitch black out. Like one of the interviews, I think he said he couldn't see his hand in front of his face or something like that. It's like really, really dark out. Remember, this is in the middle of nowhere. So if there's no moon out and there's clouds or whatever, probably you can't see anything. So they built a fire back at camp so that they could find their way back. And they built like a big giant bonfire. It wasn't like a little tiny fire. It was a big giant fire. They said some of the logs they used were like 10-inch logs, like 10 inches across or something. So big, giant logs. That's what Jack Weiner was using. It was a big.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
It's a big old Lincoln logs.
Or am I? Anyways, they went out onto the water, and while they were fishing, they were not on the water for very long when Chuck started feeling as if somebody was watching them. He looked around, searching the darkness, and he saw a large, bright sphere of colored light hovering motionless and soundless about 200 to 300 feet above the trees to the southeast. He told his friends to look at the light, and they all saw it. It was coming up from behind the trees, I guess. I guess those are two conflicting descriptions. Which was it? Was it 200 feet above the trees, or was it coming up? Well, I think what they meant was when he first saw it was coming up from behind the trees, and then it stopped and hovered 200 feet above the trees.
That was my understanding.
Yeah. So I wrote that down weird. So they all said that it looked like the same object that they had seen on the second night or 2 nights previous. They described it as having a gyroscopic motion to its surface. The surface appeared to be made of energy and had a rolling boil look. It had 4 distinct areas of color that melted into each other. And here's a quote. It had this roiling effect to it, and like a miniature sun, very, very bright. It lit the treetops up like daylight, and it was absolutely silent. Is that kind of more or less the description you guys ran across?
Not in so much detail, though. That's very detailed.
Oh,
well, not initially. And this is kind of one of the things, and we'll talk about this later, but like the different interviews with these guys and the information that they state over, like it started out simple, their story.
I
and then,
agree. I agree.
They started adding more and more to it, it seems. Or maybe they weren't adding more and more to it. You could take this either way. You know what I mean? Either they were adding more and more to it, getting more elaborate with their story, or they were just remembering more maybe over time, you know?
Interviews can be tricky because it depends on what questions are asked, how the questions are asked, and how the interviews are edited together, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you see them on a show like Unsolved Mysteries, for example, they were on that show, or at least they did the case. I don't know if all 4 of them were on that show. I did not watch the episode. But they did a show about it. And a show like that, it's an hour format, and quite often they'll have different segments. So this segment might only be 10 minutes long. So they're going to edit the accounts, and the accounts are going to be much shorter than if you watch a documentary dedicated to this. And I don't know, that is definitely a red flag. We can maybe talk about it a little bit more later, but it's not necessarily proof of anything or another, but it is definitely worth mentioning. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point in the encounter, Charlie pointed his flashlight at the object and turned it off and on to signal like an SOS signal. And when he did this, the object stopped rising or, you know, whatever it was doing and moved towards the canoe.
Yeah. And I find that kind of weird because like in hindsight, maybe for them, if this is a real event, you know, then they basically just like flag the UFO down and say, hey, come abduct us, you know?
Right.
Hey,
yeah.
You know?
And there's a couple of cases, which I won't get into, but there are a handful of cases where people signal the UFO and they get abducted. So, you know, I guess community service notice.
Yeah, note to self, if ever in the forest and see a shining light above treetops, do not draw attention to yourself.
Maybe duck and cover. You know? Don't point lights at it. Don't shoot it with your gun. Just, you know, just hide behind a tree, let it go, and it might just leave you alone. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Don't try. There's other cases where people see a UFO and they try to shoot it with a gun. It's like, what the hell's wrong with you? What are you doing, buddy? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it stopped and it moved towards the canoe. And as it did so, a tube-shaped beam of light came down from the object as it approached. The guys in the canoe started getting pretty scared at this point, and they started to paddle back to shore, you know, like, oh shit, let's go, you know, so they just started paddling, you know, for, you know, dear life, I suppose. And of course, the object caught up to them, and they were enveloped by the light. The next thing Charlie remembered was dragging himself from the water onto the shore, and they were, you know, at the shore in front of the camp, and he walked up to the camp, and he found Jack and Jim already there. They watched the object as it moved away. Chuck was still in the canoe in a trance, staring at the object. He suddenly woke up from the trance and joined the others. And the twins had a slightly different remembrance. Like, they remembered a little bit more of the event. They also leapt forward in time, you know, as far as like the UFO being above them, and then all of a sudden they're at the shore. But they also remember seeing the object hovering for 20 to 30 feet above the water, its beam of light still shining down on the surface of the lake before it left. And, or I guess, so yeah, it was doing that. It was hovering 20 to 30 feet above the water, and it hovered there for 5 minutes, totally silent before it left, I should say. So they remember that little added detail, but other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. So when it left, the light pointed up, the object rose slowly for a short time, and then shot straight up and was gone in just a second, and sort of blended in with the other stars, according to some accounts. Other accounts, you see it just shot off and was gone, just like that, which is pretty typical. We've seen a lot of witness statements of other UFO sightings where the UFO behaved in this way. So they noticed at the camp that their fire, which had just been burning bright moments ago, was now completely burned out with just a few embers left, smoldering. Now, there should have been enough logs on the fire to burn for at least 2 or 3 hours, or at least they said, and yet they were only gone for 20 minutes and the fire was out somehow, which is sort of a strange detail, but they didn't think much of it. They just sort of went to bed, which is another strange detail because normally if something like this happened, I would be up all night. I don't think I'd even be able to sleep if I saw something like that hovering over my canoe. I definitely wouldn't be able to sleep. I can tell you that. But they just sort of were in a trance, it sounds like, and they just sort of went to sleep.
To me, it kind of sounds like if they were abducted, then the aliens that did abduct them, maybe they used some kind of mind-altering device or chemical, whatever it is, something like that, something to help them forget or make them more docile, something like that,
Oh yeah.
Which is a recurring, thing that you hear with abduction cases, where the person doesn't necessarily remember, the event until well after the event, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I mean, there's so many different cases that, that there's varying different levels of that kind of information, but it seems to be a common one with a lot of people that they don't remember it right away. They just remember like that time had passed and, they kind of look at it as something that was very fishy or odd, but they can't quite put their finger on what happened, which kind of sounds like that's what happened here.
For sure. Yeah. Agent Ether, any comments so far on the sighting event?
Fixing my...
She's distracted.
thing.
All right. So the next day they reported the sighting to a park ranger, and the ranger said it was probably caused by searchlights at the grand opening of a hardware store in the town of Millinocket. And I looked this up on the map, and on the map, it looks like it's roughly 60 miles away. I just kind of ballparked it.
Yeah.
I found Eagle Lake on the map in Maine, and it's pretty far. It's nowhere near Eagle Lake. There's no way. It's just completely silly. I think the park ranger didn't know what to think of it. He's like, it's probably just the searchlights, because he probably saw the searchlights, I guess. I don't know. But I mean, I've seen searchlights hitting the clouds and stuff before. It can look unusual. It can even look pretty weird, but
oh yeah,
it ain't going to look like what these people described, Oh
yeah.
So they continued their camping trip for 10 more days, give or take, I guess. And they didn't see the object again. They went home and lived happily ever after.
Well,
the end. And that's the case file, guys. It's a short one this week. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, if that was all there was to it, we wouldn't be talking about it. But it goes on from there. But it doesn't continue until 12 years later. After the sighting, they did mention it to friends and family, but nobody believed their account. It was 12 years later, though, that they actually started reporting it to what actually happened to them. And something led into this. Okay, it wasn't just sort of random. Jim was injured in a fall that resulted in like epilepsy or seizures. So you got like a head injury.
He broke his back too.
Yeah.
From what I understand. Yeah, it was a bad accident. He fell from like 14 feet or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he went to a friend's house. I guess he used to be an electrician's apprentice, and he was going to look for a fuse box. So he opened up a door. It was like a closet door, and he thought the fuse box was in there, and it led to a basement, but there were no stairs. Wow. So he fell, and he landed like in a seated position, and it drove like he said it drove his brainstem up into his skull and broke his back. And then ever since then, he'd had problems with epilepsy.
Yeah, that's messed up, man.
Seizures and stuff, and yeah.
Hey, if you don't got
Sounds
stairs,
like a bad one.
If you don't got stairs in your basement, put a sign or something. That's messed up,
right?
Yeah. But yeah, so after this injury, he began to have nightmares about the camping trip. And here's a quote, for example, there's a lot on this, but one short quote is, he said, "There were always certain elements of the dream that were the same. Some type of creature, being helpless, being violated, was a feeling I often woke up with." And his twin brother, Jack, he talked about it a little bit with Jack. And Jack also had started to have similar nightmares. And some people think that there might be some kind of weird twin connection going on here, which it would be easy to dismiss, but as we've talked about on a previous episode, I think spooky stories, like we've had some strange experiences ourselves, so I'm not ready to dismiss that outright. It's possible, I suppose, even though it seems very weird. But so his brother Jack did have some nightmares as well, and here's a quote from him. I was starting to have nightmares, really terrible nightmares that I could not explain. I found myself in a very brightly lit room. I had no idea where I was or why I was there. To my left, I could see my brother Jim, Chuck Rak, and Charlie Foltz sitting on some type of bench, and they were all naked. I was wondering why they weren't helping me, because I felt like I was in danger, and while I'm trying to figure this out, I noticed this figure, or a dark, shadowy type figure emerging from this light, this bright light in front of me. I would wake up, sweating and breathing heavily and just in a state of terror and shock. Sometimes Jim would wake up at night, surrounded by these creatures. He would see them surrounding him. He would be paralyzed during this encounter, and sometimes he would be levitated off of his bed. So that's one of the things about this case is that Jim reported, well, actually, 3 of the witnesses actually reported encounters after the event, and Jim reported them actually going back to his childhood. His doctor at the time was somewhat familiar with UFO cases, Jim's doctor, and he suggested Jim actually go see like a lecture by UFO researcher Ray Fowler, which was in May of 1988. So the 4 friends went, and they had been talking about this and how, you know, they were sort of talking about the UFO experience, which they hadn't discussed in years, I guess. So they went, and Jim talked to Ray and told him about their encounter and the missing time. MUFON investigator David Webb and hypnotist Tony Constantino also got involved with the investigation. So one thing led to another, and they all did separate regressive hypnosis sessions. So they were not in the same. Sometimes they'll do these like in a group setting or you'd be in the same room, but they separated them and did it by themselves to try to see if they would come with the same story, basically. And you can actually find this transcripts of this. I'm not sure if they're online. I didn't really look for them because, you know, it would be a lot to read on the show.
I looked for them.
Did you find them?
No, I was really sad. I even went to the Wayback Machine.
They're actually in a book, though.
Okay.
So you can find those in a book. And
are you talking about because you cut out there for a second for me. So are you talking about the, like all of them, like if they have like a website or something like that?
No, I didn't see a website that they all have, but no, I was talking about
they do, as a matter of fact, and they also sell paintings and stuff. Excuse me, they sell paintings.
Do they?
And
I didn't see
about
that.
The abduction and stuff. Yeah.
What's the website?
I saw it on. I didn't write it down because I didn't think it was that important.
I got
really.
it.
I was just
AllagashUFOTwins.com, but I don't think it's up anymore. I think.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay. I didn't go on the site.
I saw that.
Reading that they had one.
I went
website.
to the Wayback Machine and I looked at that site specifically, so you can view their artwork, which is cool. You can see all their like paintings and drawings and photography, and there's some like pottery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw that link. I clicked on it, but yeah, the website was not up anymore, unfortunately. So yeah, I did see that one. So, but unfortunately, yeah. So that was so anyways, let's see. They went to, where was I? So they went and had the regressive hypnosis, and when they did so, they remembered details of the night that they hadn't caught before. So when the story starts again, let's say when they're in the canoe, and when the beam of light hit them, they were enveloped by it, and it seemed like a hollow glass tube. It sort of, was sort of surrounding them. It transferred them to the object above. And when I looked at the statements like transferred, like, did they float? And they sort of described it as more of like a teleportation or something. It's weird. But once they were on the ship, they saw strange humanoid creatures with big heads and big eyes. Basically, your gray aliens, although if you look at their artwork, some of them are quite terrifying. They're not your cute little gray aliens. They're your gray aliens.
Yeah.
your nightmare fuel aliens. So I have a couple of quotes here from a couple of the witnesses about their experience. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all of the transcripts because it'd be quite a lot, but here's what Jack Weiner said. They're right here.
Good old Jack.
Their face is right in my face. I don't know why. I don't want to know. I don't want to know what they want. They're saying things in my head. They're saying, don't be afraid. They say, do what we say. Just do what we say. And then Charlie Foltz said, it's like a doctor's office. I get that. It's cold like a doctor's office is cold. They put the panel over your chest. Then they scrape your arms and your chest, your legs and thighs. We shouldn't be here. I just keep thinking, I want to be back in the canoe. And here's another quote. Chuck saw what was done to Charlie. This is a quote by Chuck. He was watching what was being done to Charlie. I see some sort of device on him. They've got this looks like a silvery. It looks like it's got curves on it. It's almost like it sucks something. He's got his head tipped way back. It's almost like he's in pain. We can't help him. All we can do is watch him. So that's what Chuck said about that.
Mm-hmm.
While they were on,
didn't he say?
Yeah.
Didn't he say like they were like manipulating his joints and stuff, or is that somebody else's quote? Like they were manipulating his body and stuff, and like I remember him saying, I think it was him that said like if they keep on doing this, they're gonna hurt him real bad. Like he was very worried about what they were doing to him. You know?
Yeah, I did see that one. Yeah. So while they're on the ship, when they first got there, Charlie looked down and saw the canoe on the lake below them empty. They were told to go to a room, and they weren't able to refuse, as if they were under some kind of control, like they didn't have control over their bodies. Jack remembers a weird instrument with a scoop on the end, and Jim watched as they examined Jack. I guess Jack was up first. They used a thin rod with a light on it to examine his body from like head to toe, like his eyes and everything. And they inserted an object into his penis, apparently to extract sperm.
Oh.
That could be a good time, you know?
Bodily fluids. Yeah.
And then Jim was up next, and he felt strongly like he had to take off his clothes, the way he described it. It wasn't like they were controlling his body. It almost sounds more like a compulsion of some kind. It's weird. Like, I don't know. So he was examined just like his brother was, and then the other two were next. Chuck remembers seeing a machine embedded in Charlie's chest, which is like, that doesn't sound like a good
weird.
Time. Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Oh no, yeah.
So
sounds like some anime stuff.
Yeah. So they took samples of, bodily fluids, skin scrapings, saliva, blood, that kind of thing. And then when they were done with the examinations, they were led to a room with a portal or tube in it, and then they went through it one at a time. And they had to pass through like sort of a membrane, as they described it. Jack said it was as if he was running through something thick, and it made him feel like he was coming apart. He saw bright images in his mind. He saw little pieces of things, little pieces of threads and things coming towards him. And here he says, as a quote, I see myself coming towards myself like a mirror. I can see my face, and I'm screaming, and my eyes are open real wide, and my mouth is open real wide, and my tongue is sticking out, and my ears are coming off. Like, the hell does that mean?
That's crazy. That's kind of crazy.
It's like they're being teleported or something. It's weird. I don't even know how to. It's weird. I don't know. I don't know what to even think about that.
Yeah, one of them said they felt like they were being ripped apart on a molecular level.
Yeah.
They described it as being such an unpleasant feeling, like it felt like death.
Well, what's wrong with the parachute? You got to get back to the canoe, Sometimes low tech is better. So that was briefly what happened in the UFO. You can find lots and lots of more accounts of what happened in there, more further details and stuff. I don't know. What did you guys hear about the examinations or anything like that? You guys got more to say on that?
Well, I mean, you pretty much covered everything I've heard about it. I mean, yeah.
I actually watched a bunch of interviews like on YouTube, and they were with like local news stations. And then there was one called Sightings. They all looked pretty old, like from the 80s and 90s. But they were in the actual interviews with the abductees.
Mm-hmm.
But like Agent ETA was saying, I felt like every time they told the story, it was a little different, but not a little different in a way that made sense.
Yeah,
like
it's not like it's not like they were like having contradictory stories, but like when I was listening to those interviews, it seems like a little bit was added on each time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. And like in one part, Agent Anderson was saying that they didn't talk about it when they got back to the campsite, but then during an interview, one of the abductees said that's all they could talk about was speculating what happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not see that account, but that is very interesting if that's, if they said that in an interview.
And I guess Chuck said when they saw the light and it was up in the sky, he said something like, "That's a heck of a case of swamp gas."
Yeah, I saw that, yeah. That is, still to this day a somewhat famous saying. I think people are aware of the saying more so than they are where that even comes from,
But that made me suspicious too, because did he really think it was swamp gas? It's just kind of a weird comment to make.
Yeah. Although this is a lot closer to the swamp gas sightings. This was in 10 years after the swamp gas sightings. So it was probably still in the public consciousness a lot more when it happened.
I suppose.
So it's, who knows?
Yeah. Well, and one of the other, I guess there was a couple different, contradictory things, but the first explanation that I heard, or the first description of, the wand or, the instrument that the aliens were using, was described as, had, a needle end, or it was, it was, a wand with, that tapered down to, a sharp end or something like that. And then I heard another interview with these guys that said actually it had a bulb on the end. And so I don't know. It's a little different. There's two different things. And I know that, I forget which guy was it. Was it, I forget. I think it might've been Jim. I don't know. I forget who, but
part of the problems with the interviews were, nowadays when you're interviewing someone, you have their name captioned down below and who they are. And a lot of these interviews, they're older. They don't have that. They just have these guys talking and you're like, wait, is that guy Chuck? Wait, I think that's Chuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to keep them straight, except for the two brothers.
I remember one of them stating that they were afraid that they're going to cut him open with that wand or whatever. But if it had a bulb on the end of it, then why would you be afraid of them cutting you open with that? Because it's not a sharp tip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a little fishy, but.
Well, maybe they were just in a situation and they just had sort of fears. Who knows?
Sure. Well, shit, if I was in that situation, I'd be scared out of my freaking mind, man.
Yeah.
For sure. I'd be pissing myself if I had the option to, which maybe the aliens wouldn't give you that option, maybe, because they have you under a comatose state,
Right. Yeah. So when they came to, they found themselves, this is more of the hypnosis stuff that they revealed. So they found themselves seated in the canoe, in the same spots that they were before they were taken. And they continued to the shore where they gradually came to and gained their senses and memories, or they sort of came out of the trance or whatever and started to be able to remember things again, I guess you should say. So another revelation came from the hypnosis is that Jim and Jack had other encounters with these beings throughout their lives. They had similar abduction encounters going all the way back to their childhood. The creatures would visit them in their bedrooms while the craft hovered over their house. And they had experienced some paranormal things when they were younger in their house. And they had thought it was maybe ghosts or poltergeist or something like that. But then they realized that it was actually, no, that's just, they were remembering only bits and pieces of it. And it was actually the abductions that were going on that was causing these memories, not actual paranormal experiences. So I'm not sure how that works. That's kind of weird. So if you see a ghost, it might actually be an alien. I don't know. But I
don't know. I've always wanted to see a ghost, though. Actually, I'm kind of jealous sometimes, to be honest. I know that maybe some people, they actually have had these experiences. They're why would you be jealous? But no, I want to see a damn ghost.
Yeah.
See, I saw interviews after the hypnotic sessions.
Uh-huh.
And the twins stated that, their lives really changed after this abduction. And they describe different, well, I'll talk about it later. They describe different ways in which their lives changed because they encountered these aliens. So it doesn't make sense to me that they would have childhood abductions, but after this abduction, then their lives suddenly changed.
Right. Why? Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Why would their lives change if they've been abducted their whole lives, basically?
Right.
Yeah. So there's one account I found, for example, that they said that they had been abducted not just before, but also after this account. And on May 20th, 1988, for example, Jack woke to the sound of his dog scratching on the downstairs door. He went down to have a look. He went into the kitchen, which was lit up from outside by a bright bluish-white light. He opened the front door and saw a blue glowing object hovering in the field across from his house. He got his dog and went back inside. That's what he remembers, but under hypnosis, he remembered a couple of extra things. So after he opened the door, he walked towards the light, took a couple of steps, but then he turned back and went inside and brought his dog with him. I guess the dog was maybe outside with him, closed the door behind him and went back upstairs and got into bed. He pulled the covers over his head and his wife's head, and he felt like somebody was in the house. Now, I would just like to point out that despite what conventional wisdom may suggest, covers are not actually protection against anything. So if you guys are ever in a scary situation, maybe
pull a gun out.
Yeah. Find a closet to hide in. I don't know. The covers, that's a little obvious. People are going to be whatever is attacking you, whether it's a Bigfoot or an alien or just a, run-of-the-mill burglar, they're going to find you under those covers, So anyways, the covers start to slide down from his head, all by themselves apparently, and he saw several creatures with big eyes and big heads standing over the bed. The creatures. He turned towards his wife and saw a creature approaching her. They received mental commands, sort of like how they had on the camping trip, and they were told to walk towards the light and were powerless to stop themselves. They walked outside, and they saw a huge, house-sized glowing object hovering over their yard. It had a beam of light coming from the bottom, which changed color from white to orange and yellow. They walked into the light and were transferred onto the craft, again, just like on the camping trip. They were separated and examined, sort of like how they were before, with samples taken and all that kind of stuff. After the ordeal, they were floated back to their house, and then they went to bed, sort of like during the camping trip. They just sort of were in a daze, despite how horrible this must have been. They just sort of went to sleep. And one thing that kind of like I've always wondered about is like, how many damn samples do aliens need to take? You know what I mean? I mean, with all the different like abduction stories that I've read about or watched a video about, what have you. At what point do they learn whatever they're trying to learn? You'd think if they were that advanced and stuff, if they're studying humans or what have you, then how many damn samples do they need to take? Well,
at what point are they done with the research?
Let's go out on a limb here and assume that these accounts are all truthful. It could be something as simple as that we change over our lifetime. We change quite a lot physiologically. As children, as adolescents, adults, as elderly, like we change significantly over our lifespan. So that alone could explain them collecting different samples just to investigate and track that, just to sort of check it out to see what's going on there. Maybe they don't age. Maybe they haven't aged for a very long time. So they no longer even understand that what aging is really. So they just want to sort of, research it basically. So there's any number of possible explanations, but I do definitely see what you're saying. They would probably know what aging was. And it does seem a little silly for them to keep, but this is something that you do that does pop up, multiple abductees. Maybe we should do some more abductions and sort of explore that a little bit more, but it does happen, or at least a lot of people report it, But in this case, Jack received burn marks to the bottom of his feet, and he also had a scoop mark on his ankle as if some flesh had been removed. So that was sort of the end of that one as far as I had in my notes. And it's different because the last one, they didn't seem to have any lasting injuries, but this time he's got like a scoop missing, and he's got burns on his feet. And it's not too clear where those burns came from on his feet. All right, we got some more stuff to talk about, but before we do that, it's time for another advertisement. That was a short ad, but let's get back to it. Okay, so that's all I had about the basic experience, and then there's tons more to talk about. But what, do you guys have anything you wanted to mention in general?
Anything, Agent ETA?
I mean, not a whole lot more than that, to be quite honest. I mean, we've talked about the majority of everything I've taken notes on.
We haven't talked about the polygraph.
Okay, let's talk about the polygraph.
Let's talk about the polygraph.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I guess they went and they wanted to, I don't know if they wanted to like convince people or if it was the person they were seeing, the specialist, what is it, Ray Fowler, wanted them to do it.
Yeah, that was one of the UFO researchers, yeah.
Somebody said they should go do it. So they went and they saw Ernest Reed, and he was actually, he used to work for the FBI. And he then was working for, I guess, the Massachusetts Police Department. And he went on to give them separate polygraph tests, and they all passed independently. Yeah. And he said it was very unlikely that all four of them, you know, would pass. And if they were all lying, that one of them wouldn't, you know, fail the polygraph test. So it was his opinion they either were telling the truth or they thought they were telling the truth.
Yeah. Although I always take that with a grain of salt. We've talked about the polygraph before on the show, or the psychophysiological detection of deception test. And it turns out even the guy who created it came out and said, yeah, this test is kind of bullshit and you should definitely not be using it for anything. The reason why it's not allowed in the court of law is it's determined that really all it's good for is maybe coercing somebody into giving you a confession because they're afraid that it might actually work, but it doesn't actually work, or at least not to 100%. It is possible to beat. And I actually saw an article in the news one time about there was somebody offering courses on how to beat the polygraph, and the government shut them down, which I'm surprised the government did, because that's not illegal, is it? Like they shut them down as if it was like an illegal operation, but I mean, it is beatable. The test is 100% beatable if you want to beat it. So,
well, because it measures three different things, right? The rate of your breath, your heart rate, and like perspiration. So if you're breathing evenly and consistently, you'll be able to control your heart rate, and then in turn control your perspiration too, right?
Yeah. And
so
you might not even have to worry about that. If you rehearse your story enough, you might be able to say it as if you believe it. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Convince yourself.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of different ways of saying it, or of beating it, but it is, I mean, it's interesting because, well, so I did see an episode of the Mythbusters where they tried to beat the polygraph and they were unable to, right? But they didn't put a whole lot of effort. They have they had a schedule to stick to, so it's not like they could practice it for months on end or whatever. And so it's not, I'm not going to say the test is completely worthless, but I am going to say that I always take that with a grain of salt. It doesn't necessarily prove anything, although it is interesting, you know?
Yeah. Well, I've heard of people using like forms of meditation in order to control themselves, you know, and that coupled with like you convincing yourself that what you're telling is true could definitely, you know, fool the test.
Yeah.
You know?
What do you think about the polygraph, Agent Ether?
I actually don't know much about polygraphs, except I used to go to the gym with someone who, I don't know exactly what his job was, but he would go after like pedophiles and make them take polygraph tests as part of his job. That was part of his job. Yeah. So they were used, I'm not exactly sure how or in what capacity, but I know it was law enforcement and they used them. So, I mean, they relied on them.
Yeah, it's not admissible in court as evidence, so they probably used it to get him to confess, basically.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I had to take a polygraph one time for applying for a job.
Oh.
And I can tell you that like when I was sitting in the lobby right there, like waiting to take the polygraph, all of a sudden I remembered all sorts of stupid shit that I did, that I didn't mention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, I forgot about that, but I still went through the polygraph and I still passed it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't react to anything from what I was told, so I was like, all right, well, okay then. You know, it was kind of my response, like, yeah, it was weird, but yeah.
Yeah, and the federal government, I'm pretty sure, still uses it for certain things, for job interviews for certain positions and stuff. So it's still in use to this day. It's just maybe questionable. I don't know. All right. So in 2015, Chuck Rak sort of had a falling out with the rest of the group, and he came out and said that the UFO sighting was real, but the abduction was all bullshit. He said that he went along with the story because he wanted to make money. But so what he said was, I don't call it a hoax, just brilliant storytelling. It's not the truth, but I have to admire the storytelling ability of these guys. However, so actually Rak also claims that they were on drugs, specifically Afghan Temple Ball. Have you guys heard?
The hell is that?
Have you guys heard of the Afghan
like some kind of
Temple Ball?
Is that some? What did you say? Nipple ball?
Temple, Afghan Temple Ball. TEMPLE.
Oh, I thought you said Afghan nipple ball. I was like, what the fuck? Like, that sounds like some crazy shit right there.
Intoxicating.
Is that a hallucinogen or something like that? Is that some crazy form of like mushroom or something? But right? I heard that too, that they were basically they were smoking weed. Yeah. Which I don't think weed would give you the impression that you got abducted by aliens. You'd be stony baloney, but like, yeah, I couldn't see that correlation. You know what I mean? Like it's just, all right, yeah, you're stoned. Okay, cool story. That's not going to give you the impression that you got abducted by aliens, though. I mean, maybe if you're on LSD or mushrooms or something like that, maybe, right? Yeah, that could be believable.
I heard
guess,
in
some
an
way,
interview that
not weed.
That his fellow abductees felt that maybe what had actually happened was that under hypnotic regression, he hadn't really experienced much, and he was upset about it. And so he kind of just came out and said that it was all a hoax, mostly because he just didn't have the same experience as the others, not necessarily that the others were lying.
Yeah, I wanted to be a UFO abductee too.
Well, I want him to play with my pee-pee.
Take my bodily fluids.
Yeah. So here's a quote from a good old Chucky boy here. He said, I remember being on the Joan Rivers show. Joan was asking, were you guys drinking or taking drugs? Fortunately, I was sitting furthest away from her. Jim was right next to her, and he had to field that question and lie, and I didn't have to lie. So this quote I found very interesting because he's saying here, he's pretending as if like, oh yeah, I super don't want to lie about anything, especially not about drugs. So, but here's where I think his story breaks down with this quote is because he's lying about being abducted by fucking aliens, and then he's going to be okay with that, and then he's going to be like, oh, but I don't want to lie about not taking drugs.
Yeah.
You're not making any damn sense.
You were also still sitting there with everybody else. If you wanted to object, you could have objected, I don't know. Maybe he just felt that maybe he was a very agreeable person or something, and he didn't want to put them on the spot, as it were. But like you could have said something if you wanted to say something, that you could have said something right then and there, So I don't know why you didn't.
If he was so uncomfortable with lying, he wouldn't have gone along with it in the first place. It just doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
So that he's sort of, with that quote, doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it's just sort of makes him seem a little disingenuous,
Well, and the whole thing that's strange to me about that is nobody makes millions of dollars off of UFO sightings or being abducted. You're not going to get rich.
No, nobody gets rich off of you.
No.
Yeah.
So that was a strange reason.
For me also, I don't necessarily trust the man because, his name, and also I'm assuming he's a boob man and I'm an ass man. You know what I mean? So Like it's a polar opposites. You know what I mean? I don't trust this guy. You know? I don't like it.
So Foltz said, "Oh yeah, sorry, ETA, go ahead."
No, I'm just saying is all.
So Foltz said that all they had was one beer at the beginning of they brought an 8-pack of beer, which I didn't even know they made 8 packs.
Yeah.
That's like, okay. So
yeah, that was kind of strange to me.
Yeah.
Also, I was like, what, a 6-pack or 8-pack? What the hell are you talking
Maybe
about? I've never seen that.
It was a 12-pack, but each of them had one on the plane on the ride over.
Maybe, yeah. But he said that they each had one at the beginning of the journey and on the first day, and they each had one beer on the last day, and they brought their empty bottles back with them. And that's it. He says they didn't have a ton of beer. They didn't have a ton of liquor. They didn't have any drugs, nothing. That's what he claims is all they had. And I know it was in the 70s, but that doesn't necessarily mean they were high on something just because it was in the 70s, you know?
But you know what? That don't make no sense to me, man, because if you're going to go, because from what I understand, what I read, originally they were planning on like somewhere around like a 2-week trip, basically, right?
Yeah, it was a 2-week trip.
They didn't end up spending that much time there. But if you're planning on being there for 2 weeks, you're only going to bring that much beer? What? No, dude. I'm going to bring multiple 12 packs, you know, and I'm going to be drinking damn near the whole time, you know.
Well, they had to pack very lightly because they had to fly into the area. And then they were on a canoe trip, so they were limited to how much stuff they could bring with them. You know, after food, water, and tents and stuff, you don't have much carrying capacity left after that.
Yeah, they weren't just chilling on a bank. They were actually actively going up the area, up the river to go fishing.
Yeah.
Which is still popular. I was looking online to see if there was anything going on in Allagash.
Well, it's a beautiful area.
And yeah, there are a lot of photos and people talking about fishing tours. There's an Allagash beer, but no mention of aliens by the locals.
Oh,
Allagash beer is delicious.
There's actually a band named Allagash too. I don't know if you guys came across this during your research. Did you guys listen to any of their music?
No, I did not.
Oh, dude, it's actually all right. Like it kind of reminds me of like early Metallica almost. I came across a song that was like just like a damn near almost like 30 minutes or something, but it was actually kind of pretty badass, man. Like it's hard rock, you know. And like they're talking about like the whole like they go throughout like throughout the song they're talking about the whole abduction like event and stuff, and it's actually kind of I recommend it, man. It's actually kind of cool, you know, if you're into, because there's it's kind of surprising how many bands are out there that make songs about like alien abductions or experiences or what have you, or even like, you know, cryptids and stuff like that. But this one is actually kind of one of the better ones that I've heard. It's not bad, man. It's really not bad. And I actually saw on YouTube, like you can look up Allagash is the name of the band, and the song, and they have different songs, but like they have a song called Allagash also, the name of their band. And it's a long song, but it's not bad. I'll just say it's not bad. You know, it's not great, but it's not bad.
I'm going to listen to it for sure.
I have to listen to this now.
Yeah.
It's kind of all right, man. Like I listened to it for a while there, and it's a long song, but it's not bad. I enjoyed it, you know.
Nice. I did not come across the band. You Google Allagash, you get a lot of stuff. I didn't see the band, but I'll have to definitely check that out.
Okay, break time.
If I had known, I would have actually tried to contact them during the week, see if I could like play an excerpt or something, you know, just for fun. Maybe at the end of the episode or something, because I don't know, they're not like the Beatles or somebody, so they would probably appreciate the extra promotion for what it's worth, you know.
Sure. Well, I think when I was watching the video, it had something like 115 likes or something like that, or so it's obviously not like a very popular video, you know what I mean? But it was, like I said, it was all right. It's a very long song. But like I had fun listening to it because like I started like paying attention to the lyrics and stuff, you know, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, they're actually talking about like the abduction and stuff like that, and like they're going over some of the claims that these guys have made, you know, and like they're kind of like talking a little bit about like their perspective, like, you know, like what they must have been going through, what they felt, you know, like and stuff like that. They're taking some liberties, but like it was kind of cool. I first clicked on it because I thought it was like a podcast or something like that covering the topic, and I just wanted to hear like what somebody else's opinion about this, and it turned out to be a song, and I was like, oh shit, okay, well this is something different, and I started like, at first I was like, all right, I'm only going to listen to this for a little bit, and then like, I was like, oh, okay, this is actually all right, like it's not like I said, it's not like it's like great music. It's not like, but it's all right though. I enjoyed it. I mean, maybe I'm too much of a critic when it comes to music, or what have you, but it was all right, man. It was enjoyable.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. Agent Ether has gone to, I think she's given medicine to the cryptids. Oh, it looks like she's back. All right. Well, actually, just one of the cryptids. Only one of them needs medicine. But all right. So back to Mr. Rak. He's a Rak man. And you were right to be suspicious of him. So apparently he has a violent temper and has been thrown out and banned from several UFO conventions. So he's sort of not a nice guy, which, if there's a falling out and the falling out is 3 versus 1, I mean, maybe the problem is the 1, not the 3. I don't know.
Possibly.
Jim Weiner, the Jim fucking Weiner. God.
Hey, Jim and Jack.
I personally believe that Mr. Rak's this is I guess from an email or something from Jim Weiner. I personally believe that Mr. Rak's self-aggrandizing rationalizations and disparaging accusations are simply the rantings of an angry and resentful individual on whom his former friends have turned their backs. A little too poetic for me, but hey, whatever. Getting the point.
I've heard him also described as a bit of a control freak, and like I guess like the fact that he couldn't recall the same event as his friends like made him a little like pissed off, I guess. Yeah, because he wasn't like in the know, or like he wasn't like he couldn't recall what they could recall, not necessarily the same thing, or as much. So it kind of pissed him off, I guess, from what I've heard. I mean, it'd be like if you were a control freak, maybe, I don't know.
It'd be like, let's say you're on a camping trip and you're all hanging out by the fire and you're like, okay, I got to take a leak. So you walk off to the side a little bit, you're peeing on a tree or whatever, and your friends are like, dude. And you're like, hold on, man. Can you give me, so I need 15 more seconds, and you go back and they're like,
no, come over here.
They're like, dude,
come over here. We're getting all Brokeback Mountain over here and shit, man. Then you're not involved in stuff. And you're like, oh, like,
well, no. You get, not in this scenario. You get back and you're like, what's going on? They're like, dude, we just saw the strangest shit, dude. Bigfoot just walked across our fireplace, like our campground. You're like, no shit. You're like, fuck. I missed it. That would be just my luck.
Well, I got to be honest. Like Bigfoot is one of those things where, like, to me, like, if I were to miss out on that kind of a sighting, I'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah, we should do another Bigfoot episode.
Damn it. Yeah. Oh well, shit. I mean, there's Bigfoot sightings around the world, not just North America. I mean, there's. I mean, whether you want to call it Bigfoot or whatever multiple names that this creature may go by.
Swamp ape, the Yowie, the Almasty. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, Yeti.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So the UFO researcher Ray Fowler also had something to say about Chuck Rak. He said, Chuck Rak did not have very detailed recall of the abduction under hypnosis, as we were just saying. He is the type of person who needs to be in control. He was not happy not being able to have detailed recall of the abduction portion of the incident. Thus, several years after the investigation, he claimed that no one was abducted. Now, that you guys were just talking about that, but I just wanted to reiterate that the researcher himself had that opinion, so we know that's one source where that's coming from. So it's not just hearsay or something, but we know an actual source for that quote. Maybe other people said it too, but that's what I found for that one. And Jim Weiner was talking about an incident that happened before the Joan Rivers interview. He said, Charlie Foltz and I were visiting Jack and his wife Mary at their home in Vermont. One morning, Mr. Rak arrived at the house and declared he had a plan to make $1 million on the Allagash case. His UFO sighting. His proposal.
I heard about this too. Yeah.
His proposal was that all 4 of us refute the professional handling of the case by Raymond Fowler, Tony Constantino, and MUFON, thereby creating controversy. which was, in Mr. Rak's mind, exactly what the media and the public crave and pay for. In response to his proposal, Jack, Charlie, and I all voiced our disgust with his ethics and his proposal and announced our unanimous decision to have no further interaction with him regarding future Allagash projects. Unfortunately, we later forgave his inebriated indiscretion and appeared together on a couple of TV projects and UFO conferences, but it was glaringly clear to Jack, Charlie, and I that Mr. Rak's behavior was becoming increasingly pathological. So that's just a quote about it. So, I mean, even though he did come out and say, the one witness came, Mr. Rak came out and said that it was all a lie, the other people came out and said, he's kind of just got a chip on his shoulder, So there is a refutation. They did refute that. Refutation, is that even a word? I don't know. But they did refute that it was fake, So we do have a back and forth here. Just because one of the witnesses came out and said it was fake, we do have good reason to believe that he would have a motive to do so. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it was real, but it doesn't mean it was fake either,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's basically all I had on the case. There's a ton on this case. There's like books and stuff. You can look up interviews. You can go on in this case. Like, we could have done quite a lot more, but I think that summary was good enough. Did you guys, how about you, Agent Ether? I see you looking at your paper.
Well, I just wanted to mention in one of the interviews that I saw, they're all artists. So they were going to school, and one was like a painter and one was into pottery. And one did like mixed media. I don't know if you saw that.
He had his master's in pottery, apparently.
Mastery in pottery. So, and they just did regular things. Like one painted landscapes and still lifes, and the other just did, urns and pots. Nothing exciting. So apparently after this the big abduction, I actually didn't know about the childhood abductions, but after this, what is it?
Could you get closer to your mic there, Agent Ether?
But after the abduction, you're welcome. The Allagash abduction, apparently their artwork all changed. One of them stated that he felt like he was being reprogrammed. And especially after the hypnotic regression, they would immediately go home and start to do their artwork as part of a way of remembering what had happened to them. And in one case, you had the artist who was painting still lifes. He went on to start making these folding paper patterns, and he would make up these math patterns based on pi, and then he would be painting them. And he said he felt like it was almost a compulsion to do art, to do this new kind of art.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. And then another one of the interviewees, the abductee, said that he became obsessed with ancient temple architecture. And he was convinced that this ancient architecture was actually a map for microchip technology, like that it was a motherboard. And
That's weird.
Yeah. So I found that highly interesting when I was watching these gentlemen. Towards the end of the interview, it started to spiral out for me. So they kind of had me, I'm watching these different interviews. A lot of the stories are the same, but they vary in different ways. They seem to be getting more elaborate. But then, they end on this note. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know about this. That just kind of seems a little off the deep end for me.
There's a couple of, when you get an interview like this, they probably paid them, right? And I imagine that certain outlets, I'm not going to name names, but certain outlets seem to
History Channel
encourage, Unsolved Mysteries, seem to encourage witnesses, particularly in UFO cases, to sort of embellish a little bit, maybe, and I wasn't there. I don't know that happened for certain, but I have seen cases on Unsolved Mysteries where this sort of thing happens. So if you're paying somebody for an interview, you're going to want them to say something new that they didn't say in an interview that they did last year, for example. Otherwise, why would anybody want to watch it, So there may have been sort of, a gentleman's agreement to sort of embellish things. There may have been encouragement to do so.
Perhaps, but I have to say, as far as the pottery and paintings are concerned, you can go to the website and you can see that artwork that they did after their regression, etc. And it is different, you know, than what they were describing they used to do. And they had like pictures of some of the art that they used to do, and it was signed by them, 73 or whatever. And then they were comparing it to the artwork they were doing now, which was not only extremely different, but I felt was higher quality than what they were doing before.
I mean, there could be something to it. But it could also be like the way things are edited, and like, you know, we talked about before. I'm just playing a little devil's advocate, just to sort of a balanced approach. But that definitely is suspicious to me when somebody, when they elaborate more and more over time, where the story changes. But then again, I mean, that happens. Just like if you look at the Kenneth Arnold case, for example, his story was not 100% consistent either. There were minor discrepancies over time because, you know, if you tell the same story 10 times over, you're not going to tell it exactly the same time. You might remember a detail that you forgot to tell the last time, or you might say it from a slightly different perspective, you know, or you might describe something slightly differently. So that's not unusual at all for, you know, different interviews to be different. It depends on how they embellish it. And I see what you're saying. Like when there's a certain flavor to invention, you know, versus somebody who's telling a story and then they forgot to tell a particular piece of information that they left out. So they add that this time, or maybe they leave something out that they mentioned last time. It strikes you a little differently than somebody who's like making it up, you know?
I have to say this though, the artwork was a lot different. I don't know if I'd call it good, especially the illustrations, but the pottery was different.
Yeah.
You know, it definitely from what they were doing before. And I did like some of the mathematical looking sort of paper folding illustrations that he was talking about. I found those kind of interesting. I don't know that I'd hang it in my living room or anything, but I thought they were kind of neat to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked at a little bit of their art. I didn't have time to check out much of it.
It was nothing earth-shattering.
Yeah.
You know, I almost wish that it was. I would love to say I looked at this artwork and I was like, that's out of this world. They were inspired by, you know, a higher order or higher being. Like, that would be really cool. That was not the impression I got looking at this artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And the only reason why I would hang it on my wall is just because it's kind of nostalgic. You know what I mean? Like
right.
It's related to this big case that I'm interested in and, you know, I find very interesting, you know. But like, yeah, that's the only reason why I'd hang it on the wall. It's not because it's high art, you know.
Right. Yeah. All right. So I think we've gone over most of the particulars of the case. So now it's time for our opinions. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you guys think it happened? Do you guys think it's partially true? Maybe they made everything up. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm a little biased. I've never been a huge, I'd like to say, fan of alien abduction.
Right.
You know, when we talk about these cases and we talk about the sightings and the evidence and so forth, that really interests me and that grabs my attention. But these abductee cases, I find a little hard to believe. So I'm going in there a little biased, I'll admit.
I think part of that, for me anyways, is that it's so far removed from anything I've experienced in my own life. It's hard to put myself in that place, you know? But you should look into you weren't with us on the Betty and Barney Hill case. Like, I don't know exactly what's what with that case, but I'm convinced something strange happened to those people.
I will say, though, I've seen a couple of movies with alien abductions, and they did freak me the hell out. So there is that. What was that one we watched where I remember at the end was stupid because the kid, like, there's the walkie-talkie, and you could hear him talking over the walkie-talkie to his brother. What was that called?
I forget. The movie overall wasn't that good, but it had some very creepy moments.
Yeah.
Very creepy moments.
And one scene, the mom goes into the room and out of the corner of her eye, it's like dark and she sees this tall figure.
Yeah.
So she turns around, turns on the light, turns back, and her son's missing from the bed.
Yeah.
So then the house alarm goes off and she finds him like outside staring up into the sky. So somehow he got out through the house, into the yard, like in the blink of an eye when she turned around to turn on the lights.
Yeah.
It's a quick kid.
Yeah.
They're very agile.
It's the
Very
Flash.
young, you know?
It was so, that whole movie. Oh.
Yeah. Ether had to sleep with the lights on that night.
I did. That was
Oh, really?
Yeah.
scary. I didn't like it at all.
Yeah, it was pretty damn creepy, that's for sure. Have you seen Fire in the Sky?
I don't know. Have I?
That's the movie they made about the Travis Walton abduction. Probably not. That was that was in the 90s.
It was a decent movie.
Yeah, it was
fun.
It wasn't bad. Yeah.
Will I get creeped out or should I see it?
It was pretty creepy. It's pretty creepy. I mean, it's not exactly what he reported happening, but they try to demonstrate what he was feeling on the screen, you know, with stuff that he didn't report happening, but it's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Pretty damn creepy in some places. But yeah, how about you, ETA? What do you think about this case?
So my opinion is I'm all in. This all happened. There's absolutely no reason to assume that it didn't happen. Every single abduction that has ever happened is true. No, I'm joking. So I'm on the fence a little bit about it. I lean towards believing them because I want to be quite honest. But like this case, like it's compelling. There's no doubt about that. But I just don't. I don't know which way to lean on this one. You know what I mean? Like it's there's not quite enough. All the evidence that you have is basically their testimony.
I gotta say too, they didn't seem overly traumatized. And I know they've told their story at this point probably dozens of times, but you're listening to these interviews and they just seem so flat to me. You know, there's like an energy that's missing as they're talking. All of them. There's not even one where I felt was what's the word, charismatic, I guess.
Yeah, or compassion. You know?
Yeah, I felt like it really lacked a depth of feeling that I would.
I've seen some interviews from people that claim to have been abducted and like what they're like as they're sitting there like describing their story, like they get brought to tears. You know, you can see like there's extreme emotion involved with what they are describing, you know.
Right.
And that kind of stuff to me is maybe they're good actors, I don't know, but like, you know, like it's very compelling at the very least. You know, they seem to be very genuine. I'm speaking in generalities here now because there's so many different cases, right? But like, I've seen some interviews that really, really compelled me towards believing what this person is saying, as far as what they're claiming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't get that same feeling with these interviews that I've seen with these guys. You know?
Yeah. For me personally too, I'm sort of with ETA here. I'm like on the fence. Like the story is very compelling, but I'm not like 100% convinced. I think it's possible that they did see something strange. Maybe they saw a UFO in the distance or something, and then it just sort of spun into this story over the years, you know, with retellings and stuff. There are some details.
Possible.
There are some details, like when they were when they did the hypnosis, they did that separately, and their stories matched, except for Mr. Rak's story, which did have some differences. But
yeah,
I mean,
but here's the thing: they had every opportunity to talk about this event before they went under hypnosis. They all agreed to do it. So
it was 12 years later.
Like, yeah, it was 12 years later, and also they had ample time to talk about it beforehand. So they could have agreed upon a storyline that they all wanted to present or what have you. You know, like if that would have happened like directly after like their quote unquote abduction event or what have you, then I'd be more convinced to believe them. But you know, since it was quite a bit later after what had happened, then I don't know, man. It's they could have all agreed upon like, you know, the story that they wanted to present. So I don't know. It could be either way. I could go either way on it. Like I said, I want to believe, but I'm not necessarily. I'm not convinced. You know, I'm not convinced on this story. You know, like it sounds very, very grandiose. You know, and it's very similar to a lot of abduction stories that I've heard, but I've seen other abduction stories, like I said, where the compassion involved and like how upset the person is while they're telling their story seems to convince me a little bit more. And
for sure.
Maybe that's just
so like I was saying, like
anecdotal.
I'm sort of on the fence on this one because there are details in the case, like for example, the matching stories under hypnosis, or even to a small extent the polygraph tests, which are not really reliable, but there's certain details like that sort of pull me in and make me think, well, this seems like there is something here. But then on the other hand, there are details that kind of I don't know. It sounds like a science fiction story at the same time, it doesn't, I don't know. So I'm on the fence on this one. I'm not necessarily dismissing it, but I'm not necessarily all on board either. I think it's a really interesting story. And if it is fake,
well, it's like
they did a really good job of fabricating the story. But I think it's possible it could be real. I think it's possible it could be a hoax. I'm not really sure. I have no idea on this one.
Well, it's like all the evidence that I've seen here, it draws you in, then it draws you out, then it draws you back in. You know what I mean? Like I said, I want to believe, but there are some red flags here, that like, it's not necessarily, I'm not saying they're liars, but like, it makes me kind of question, what's going on here, the reality of the situation, you know what I mean? Like, I guess like at the end of the day, like I said, like, I'm on the fence, but I'm leaning towards them because, I don't know, what if this did happen, mm-hmm. I keep on asking myself, like, if this did happen, then I feel sorry for these people, man. This is a very negative situation to go through. So, like, I don't want to call. I know I hate calling anybody liars. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like doing that, right? So I want to believe you, but sometimes there are some red flags, like I said, that like make you question the situation, and some situations, like some UFO abductions that I've, done a little bit of research on and stuff and been interested in, some of them are, there are very little red flags. And the thing is also, like, the story, like, is the same the whole way through. You never see any deviation. You never see anything like added on to the fact. The story is the story, and they keep on telling this individual that claims to be abducted, keeps on telling the same story over and over again without any discrepancies. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of stuff that, like, I believe them when it's that kind of a story. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that about wraps it up for this week's episode. Before we leave you here, hold on, let me hit the flag here. Make sure I can edit that out for our Patreon subscribers who get this ad free. And I guess that's all we got for you this week.
Keep it strange.
Strange as fuck.
You should definitely keep that in.
Oh yeah, I'm keeping that for sure.